Welcome to the BoshNRoll channel. If you want to support my daily Eternal Magic offerings while getting amazing perks like the BoshNRoll Discord community, have me play your deck on the channel, or listen sideboard guides before tournaments, check out the Patreon or YouTube membership program. This channel is possible because of these amazing sponsors. Check them out, all their links are in the video description. As always, thanks for being here. Let's go play some Magic. Welcome back to the BoshNRoll channel. Today I'm recapping a tournament that occurred last weekend, the weekend of July 29th, 2023. It was the Cookout, a cEDH tournament run by Eminence Gaming, also a sponsor of this channel. Shout out to Eminence, they're awesome. Those of you who have been following cEDH or my stuff in general know that I have played in 2 cEDH tournaments before this one, and I won both of them. And there was a lot to live up to here, and spoiler, I did not three-peat, but I did have a really good tournament. I was playing my usual Tymna Kraum, aka Blue Farm. The list is available on my Mox field. As always, my Patreon subscribers had access to the list before the tournament. Everyone else gets it after. For those of you who don't play a lot of cEDH, I'll just do a quick summary of the deck. Tymna, at the beginning of your post-combat main phase, you may pay X life, or X is the number of opponents that were dealt damage this turn, combat damage this turn. If you do, draw X cards. Kraum, 4/4 flying haste. Whenever an opponent casts their second spell in a turn, draw a card. Basically, both these commanders say draw a card, and together they cover all 4 colors that aren't green that we want to be playing. Tymna incentivizes you to have creatures in your deck, and because neither of these commanders have any sort of win the game engine on them, they both just have card advantage. We don't have a lot of stuff in our deck that is commander centric specifically. Like a lot of decks like Kinnan, Bonder Prodigy, who won the tournament, you need a bunch of stuff that feeds specifically Kinnan. Pivot, Seller of Secrets, a deck that I really like, goes pseudo-infinite with Time Sieve. So you have like AB combos, and they really use their commander. This is just for the colors and the fact that they say draw a card. Tymna does ask you to put some creatures in your deck, and we have quite a few. A bunch of disruptive creatures that either mess with your opponent or add value. Many of them have evasion. We've got Shadow, Flying. This is 2 creatures. Pseudo Haste if you want it. Kraum also has Flying and can trigger Tymna. All our creatures do cool things, and then they can also, if you get into a draggy combat situation, you can just start drawing cards with Tymna. The end game is Thassa's Oracle, whether it comes through Underworld Breach or you pair it with Demonic Consultation or Tainted Pact and exile your entire deck, and then you have nothing left. Underworld Breach, shout out to that. I would rank the win conditions in this deck as Underworld Breach, then Oracle Consult, then combat damage, basically. I play this like it's a Breach deck with a bunch of creatures in it. But it does have other modes. Nauseam's in here if you want to go fast. Wheel of Fortune's in here if you want to go fast. But you can also take it slow. It's a 4-color control deck that is a combo deck when it wants to be, and it's a 4-color combo deck that's a control deck when it wants to be. Really nice mix of options. You really do have to understand what's going on in the format and what your role in a game needs to be in order to get the most out of this deck, but it does a lot of very cool things that I like. Into the weeds a little bit for the people more invested in cEDH. The last tournament I played in was Punt City 2, which I won, and I'm 6 cards different in my list from that tournament to this one. Some of the changes are easy. Wooded Foothills Talisman of Creativity became Windswept Heath and Talisman of Progress. Just wanted more white sources in the deck. A lot of the times you want to do like Ranger Captain of Eos, search up Esper Sentinel and cast it, and that's a white play. Sometimes you want a Grand Abolisher to start a turn, and then continue from there. That requires white. There's just a lot of white requirements. Also, Lotho, Corrupt Sheriff, an early white card you want to play. Lotho replaced Culling the Weak. Culling the Weak is a short-term burst of mana, which our deck, we're not that turbo, and our creatures are pretty valuable. Culling the Weak is only really good when you're about to shove Ad Nauseam onto the stack, and it is really good in that environment, don't get me wrong, but in the average game, I think that Lotho will generate more mana than Culling the Weak, and it's a better draw when you're not specifically casting Ad Nauseam right now. Loyal Apprentice, I replaced with Orcish Bowmasters. Just straight up, this card is defining in the format. I don't want to say warping. It is a big deal. And in 1v1, like, if you watch my stuff, you know I play Legacy all the time. You watch my Legacy stuff. 1v1 Bowmaster is just like, well, guess I can't draw cards now. In a 4-player game, there's a lot of situations where it's like, well, if you can draw 2 cards, I can kill this Kinnan, or, you know, whatever. Like, it gets really interesting and political, or you better save my Bowmasters if you don't want to die to this combat situation. Just really cool stuff. This card's great. Professional Facebreaker became Fairy Mastermind. Kind of a weird thing happened where Fairy Mastermind was printed after Punt City 2, and it just didn't exist at the time. And I made room for it by cutting the weakest 2 creatures, Loyal Apprentice and Professional Facebreaker. I think Facebreaker went first for Mastermind. It was just like, this generates card advantage. It has evasion. It has flash. It's good with Tymna. It's good without Tymna. How could we miss? And then I played almost no cEDH between Punt City 2 and the Cookout. I was just busy with the channel, busy with a vacation, just a bunch of stuff. Did not get many games in. And then Orcish Bowmasters was printed, which makes Fairy Mastermind pretty awful. And Mastermind might not have even been good in the first place, but I basically played Fairy Mastermind on no reps because 2 sets came out since the last time I played cEDH seriously. And I think Mastermind is not really where I want to be anymore. Also, Blue Elemental Blast. I liked this card because it messes up Dockside Extortionist, Underworld Breach, Winota, a bunch of stuff that I don't like in the format. But I think right now I need to be more worried about Kinnan and Tivit than I do about Winota and Breach Mirrors. So I think this Blue Elemental Blast should be probably my Pyroblast. Red Elemental Blast is already in the deck, but I think I want to go double Red Blast, and then I'll find something else to replace Fairy Mastermind. Those are the 2 changes that didn't quite do what I needed them to do in this tournament. I was pretty happy with every other card in the deck. This video is sponsored by Moxfield.com, the easiest way to build Magic decks online. Moxfield supports over 30 formats, including Legacy and everything else you'll see on this channel. There's multiple customizations so you can interact with your deck how you want. Views such as text, grid, or stacks, and groupings like type, subtype, color, color identity, even artist. The site offers light mode, dark mode, and so much more. However you want to see your deck, Moxfield can provide it for you. Follow my Moxfield to keep up with the channel and what I'm playing in paper. I'll see you there. The way these tournament reports work is I just review my Twitter feed. I always live tweet my updates each round and then use those for content later. And here we are in phase 2 of the plan. Here's the announcement. Event is starting. 5 rounds of Swiss on day 1, 2 rounds of Swiss on day 2, then a cut to top 16. And if you're used to 1v1 numbers, a top 16 is already the semifinals because it's 4 players per pod, not 2. So a top 16 is actually a top 4 if you want to move it into 1v1 parlance. So it's actually a higher cut, even though more people make it. And the way these events are structured, a win is worth 5 points, a draw is worth 1, a loss is worth 0. There's no points for 2nd, 3rd, or 4th. What order you lose in doesn't matter. It just matters who wins the pod. You can also get eliminated early, and then if the pod goes to a draw, you still get that 1 point. It's very, very clear about there's a winner of the pod, or everyone in the pod gets 1 point, period. And I think that's great the way they do that. Round 1 was an absolute disaster in the best possible way. Let me see if I can get this on the screen better. There we go. Okay. Gitrog Monster, Dihada, Binder of Wills, Malcolm Tana, and me. That's the turn order. The way that I listed them on the tweet is the turn order. So I'm in 4th seat. Gitrog Monster is going first. Gitrog Monster has turn 1 Carpet of Flowers, turn 2 Sylvan Safekeeper, turn 3 Gitrog Monster, and then they use their extra land drop to play Cavern of Souls, naming Imp, and then they play Putrid Imp and discard Backmoor Salvage. And that's the loop. That's how Gitrog Monster works. Whenever a land goes to your graveyard from anywhere, you draw a card. You discard Backmoor Salvage, which is a land with dredge. You dredge it back to its own Gitrog discard trigger. Then you mill 2, and if you mill a land in those 2, a draw trigger goes on the stack, and you can draw your deck, basically. No, not even basically, literally, you can draw your deck. And the deck plays Kozilek and Ulamog. so it won't deck itself along the way. It can put as many draw triggers on the stack as it wants, and then it wins somehow. The Gitrog player basically demonstrated the loop in about 15 minutes. They're 90-minute rounds, by the way, so we have 75 minutes on the clock. Gitrog player demonstrates the loop and says, okay, I have the loop. And we were all like, we got 75 minutes, let's see you play it out. And started playing it out, started looping, probably like 4 or 5 times along the way. It was like, okay, is this enough? Like each time a meaningful thing advanced the board, like a card went in their hand that was important or something, they were like, okay, is this enough? And we were like, no, play it out. And then at the end of their loop, they said, okay, I'll draw 90 cards. And I said, okay, you have 88 cards in your deck. And then they were dead. They miscounted. It was pretty awkward. But that's how it works. And then Malcolm goes off. The Malcolm deck combos with Glinthorn Buccaneer to do not infinite damage, but enough damage to kill all the players at the table. But that deck is better when it has 3 opponents than when it has 2, because Malcolm triggers whenever a pirate deals damage to an opponent. And normally the engine is generating 3 treasures per hit, but this engine was only generating 2 because there were only 2 opponents left because one was dead. And our Malcolm pilot got in his own head. Like, he had us dead, but he got confused by the fact there were only 2 players and that we had different life totals. So he thought he had to be more clever than he did, but he actually didn't. And rather than just killing us, he put us at 1 and 2 respectively, and then went for a final fortune to get an extra turn and finish us off without having to loop the combo. And forgot that he needed to pay for a pact of negation on his upkeep of the final fortune turn, and he only had 4 mana. So he died. That's 2 players who punted protected deterministic wins on board. And then I was next in the turn order with an opponent at 2 life, and I attacked them with Dauthi Voidwalker and won the game. So round 1 simply by surviving long enough to attack 1 time with combat damage. Pretty wild stuff. Always make him play it out. Round 2, Tymna Tymna Kraum, Kinnan, and me. So this player in the bottom left went first. I kept a turn 1 Saracen and turn 2 Drannith Magistrate hand. My turn 1 Saracen got mental misstep, which, for the record, I think is wild, even if you have the misstep. Like, I understand I'm a vested party in wanting that thing to resolve, but mental misstep's a really powerful card in a very powerful format, and just going after my turn 1 creature, I don't know that I would ever make that play, but it was done. So my Sarah Ascendant went to the graveyard. My turn 2 Drannith Magistrate already looked a lot worse because Tymna Rograk had Jeweled Lotus, Tymna Kraum had Jeweled Lotus, and Kinnan is a 2-drop, and they went before me. So there were 4 commanders in play, the Tymna, the Rog, the Kraum, and the Kinnan, before my Drannith Magistrate could come into play. So basically, my stacks piece that I kept the hand on the strength of was not useful anymore. My 6/6 that I kept the hand on the strength of was gone, and Kinnan started to run away with it. They had Kinnan, then they had the One Ring, then they had Seedborn Muse. We killed Seedborn Muse. We killed Kinnan. They found Rhystic Study, so they had One Ring Rhystic Study going. That got them back into Kinnan, and it was basically a 3v1 the entire time, and they just outmuscled all of it. Round 3 was me, Kinnan, Malcolm Tana, and Tymna Thrasios. I was on the play in top seat, and I had a land Ancient Tomb Rhystic Study, just turn 2 Rhystic Study from seat 1. Malcolm went for a win on turn 3, which I could not help with. I had tapped out for... I played a Dauthi Voidwalker on my 3rd turn, so it's turn 3, and Malcolm had to tap out into my Rhystic Study to present the Glinthorn Buccaneer to go with the Malcolm, and I had nothing, Kinnan had nothing. Tymna Thrasios, though, had a miscast, which countered the Finale of Devastation that was looking for the Buccaneer, also drew me a card. So I drew 2 cards, snuffed out a miscast from Tymna Thrasios, Malcolm didn't combo off, and then on my turn, I just shoved in Ad Nauseam and was able to do it for Xaxes. I thought I was 1 short, but then there was a Lotus Petal in the void So I used Thoughthy Voidwalker to play Lotus Petal to find the one more colored pip to Oracle Consult from 4 life with exact mana. This match went so fast that I was able to get lunch and take a nap. It was awesome. My hotel was in the venue, and there was a Waffle House attached. Just went straight to Waffle House, went upstairs, took a nap. Just amazing recharge in the middle of the day. You come here to level up at Magic. To level up as a software engineer, check out the new YouTube series Dev Better, hosted by the founder of 7 Factor Software and Magic player, Jeremy Duvall. 7 Factor's small teams of high-performing engineers build custom mobile apps, APIs, and highly scalable systems for Fortune 500 companies and ambitious startups with great ideas. If you'd like to hire 7 Factor, or maybe join their team, contact them through their website at 7factor.io. And don't forget to subscribe to 7 Factor's YouTube for every episode of Dev Better. It looks like I stopped posting my pod pictures. I promised I took them every round, but all right, no pod picture this time. Round 4 was me, Kinnan, Najeela, and Kirik. We had a really awesome game, and on the final turn cycle, I mean, we went back and forth a lot. There was a ton of interaction. I can't remember everything that happened, but on the final turn cycle, Kinnan, who was in second seat to my left, started his turn with about 48 minutes on the clock, made a win attempt that we all managed to fend off, had to pass the turn into Najeela, who started their turn with like 25 minutes on the clock. They shot their shot with a win attempt. It took 3 of us to fend it off. They passed their turn with about 10 minutes on the clock. And Kirik started to fire a win attempt, and I have the win in my hand. Like, I have Rhystic Study going. I'm gassed up. I have Cavern of Souls, Grand Abolisher, easy win from there. But the way that these tournaments are structured is that when time is called, that turn ends and the game is over. There's no 5 turns after time or whatever. It's you get your 90 minutes and you're done. As long as I get a turn, I'm okay. But if I don't get a turn, if I just run out of time, I'm going to be stranded with the win in my hand after passing with 45 minutes on the clock. So Kirik starts a turn, and I'm pretty sure it's fine or maybe even correct to interact with Kirik's stack higher up than I did. But I just fired off a Mindbreak Trap on the first enabler that I could, and they had to pass their turn. And I was, I don't want to waste 7 minutes review figuring this out. Let's just cut you off at the knees and give me a turn. So we got to my turn, and it all worked out. Once you counter souls for Grand Abolisher, the only things you have to worry about are channel effects. So Boseiju, Otawara, and Moonsnare prototype are the 3. And all 3 were live. Kinnan plays all 3. Najeela plays 2 of them. I executed my combo with Grand Abolisher. Kinnan did have the Moonsnare prototype. I had to Tainted Pact for deflecting SWAT, which, if SWAT is below Thassa's Oracle in my deck, I have to let the prototype resolve, bouncing Grand Abolisher, then try to replay it and do something else, which unlocks everybody's counter magic for the turn. But I lucked out. The SWAT was above the Oracle. I redirected the Moonsnare prototype somewhere else. And then I cast Underworld Breach, which got Besiegued out of Najeela, but I was able to Chain of Vapor, bounce my own Breach, sack all my lands, bounce all my own mana rocks. So I was able to beat 2 channel effects through Grand Abolisher and find a win through that. A really interesting thing happened this match that I think is big picture for cEDH tournaments overall. There is not really tournament policy for multiplayer. And there kind of is. There are some rules, and then a lot of the infraction procedure guide and Magic tournament rules apply the same. But then there's some stuff that doesn't. And there was a turn in this game when Najeela was trying to go off, where Kinnan looked at me and was like, "What can you do here?" And I just showed him the Mindbreak Trap in my hand and said, "I have this one." Because if I say, like, I can help, but only if another spell is cast, wink, wink, then everyone's going to know what I have. And I want my ally to know what I have and not my enemy. So I show Kinnan the Mindbreak Trap and I say, I have this one. And Najila immediately says, you have to reveal it to all players. And I called a judge because in my head, that's my information. Why do I have to do anything with it that I don't want to do? And it turns out that there is no policy written down for that situation. There is a intersection of rules that do exist, which is a player, I'm paraphrasing, a player can reveal any information they want that they have. Like private information, you could give it up if it's your information to give. There's a second rule that defines a reveal as revealed to all players. So if we assume that these things interact, like it's mine to do what I want with, but if I do show it to someone, I have to show it to everyone, then I would have to show it to everyone. But there's no actual policy for that. And the head judge spent a long time on this, talking to the other judges. He actually called previous cEDH head judges to see how they have ruled this in the past. And the way it went was, though it has been ruled that you need to reveal it to everyone in the past, this head judge chose that I don't have to reveal it for this tournament. And I think that's a really interesting place to be, because the definition of reveal, like there are things that tell the game says reveal. Reveal is a game word. That's a game action. Is flashing a card in your hand to a player a reveal in terms of game action? Or is that just something a person did who is involved in the game? I was not told by a card to reveal it. See what I'm saying? And if we want to drill down on a revealed card is revealed to all players, then we get into this stupid whack-a-mole of I write down Mind Break Trap on my notepad and show it to my opponent, or show it to the person I'm currently working with. I got this one. I've not revealed a card. I've revealed my notes. And notes are, I don't have to explain to or share with anyone, according to policy. Like, is that the line we want to draw? Or should I just be able to do the most natural thing in the world, which is flash a card in my hand to a player and say, I got this one? Which happens all the time in casual EDH, by the way. If we're following the EDH to cEDH pipeline, you've probably said, I got this one, and shown it to one, but not all players, 1,000 times in your life. I talked to the judge, the head judge, about the policy in general and like why it might be one way or the other. And it's still being developed. cEDH tournament policy does need some of its own things, and they will be written down eventually. But the judge expressed concerns of collusion and bullying. Collusion, of course we're colluding, you know, like cEDH is a series of 3v1s. It's not for people in it for themselves at all times. There is one person trying to win most of the time and 3 people trying to stop them. And it is a rolling series of 3v1s where, yes, the 3 other players are going to work together or collude to stop the player who's going for it. So yeah, we are. Collusion has a definition in the IPG or the MTR, which is very bad and disqualifiable. So I'm not talking about Magic the Gathering capital C collusion. I'm talking about Merriam-Webster dictionary collusion, where you work together to do something. So I don't like that argument. And then the idea of bullying, he kind of said, like, we don't want players to feel bad because we 3 have the thing and you don't have the thing. We're in the club and you're not, which is, I think, a stretch. Like, I'm as anti-bullying as anyone, but we're in a tournament. You have your hand in the cookie jar right now trying to take the win from the 3 of us. And you're worried about bullying that person by sharing information that could help stop them from winning the game. Like, what are we doing here if that's the definition of bullying? So I don't buy either of those. I do see the argument of those 2 rules that are on the books of what the definition of a revealed card is. But I don't want to get into the game of, I didn't reveal a card, I wrote down my notes. Or if it becomes like lean over and whisper into someone's ear. I don't want people whispering in my ear. I don't know these people. They're just like competitors in a tournament. I don't want strangers that close to my ears. Like, what the hell? Why don't we just do the most natural thing of reveal the card to the people we want to reveal it to? That's my pitch for that. It's still in development. I don't know. It might end up either way, but I feel strongly that you should be able to reveal a piece of information that you have that other people don't have to exactly who you wanted to reveal it to and nobody else. Plus, if I reveal it to player 2 on player 3's turn and then don't end up using it, now 2 knows I have it for the rest of the game. So there's some game risk involved. Also, I have no assurances that if I share something with player 2, they won't just say, oh, it's Mind Break Trap to player 3 and 4. You know, I'm taking real risk in order to make this happen. I don't know. I think I've said what I need to say about that. That's how I feel about it. The Command Tower software by Eminence Gaming is perfect for hosting TCG events. It features easy-to-create event registration for 1v1 and 4-player Swiss structure tournaments. Event management has never been so simple, and it's web-based, so there's no download required. Get access for just $5 at eminence.event/subscribe. Round 5, we all agreed to draw. I had 15 points. 16 points is usually the line for top 8, or at least 16 points is the breaker scrum. Some 16s will make it, some won't, but locking up 16 points on day 1 rather than in round 7, our breakers should be great. Just taking the draw up to 16 points at the end of day 1, and then we could spend day 2 just farming extra points or doing whatever we need to do. Felt like the right call at the time. All right, looks like my pod pictures are back. Good job, me. Round 6, I'm in first versus Magda, Tevesh Dargo, and a Tymna Kraum mirror. This is very close to my Nightmare pod. Tymna Kraum is weakest when it has to play Table Police by itself. If I'm the only blue deck in a pod with against 3 people all trying to shove wins, I'm going to run out of answers before they run out of threats. And we have 2 non-blue, and then a Tymna Kraum mirror that does have the Breach Nauseam gear to it. They could play like a non-blue deck if they wanted to. So this is a pretty stressful pod. I started the pod by speaking across the table to my opponent, or the other Tymna Kraum player. I was like, we got to keep these psychos honest. I really like laying down the groundwork of kind of, this is how I see the game going, and I think we're going to have to work together, or, you know, whatever. I like saying that, getting that established before there's a, you know, ad nauseum on the stack. I want them to know that I plan on working together, and I would like it on their radar that we're going to need to, in case they don't know. Magda had a Chalice on 0 from second seat. That's pretty potent. Dargo didn't do anything, basically the entire game as a result. They went Swamp Go, and then they were moving to discard for basically the rest of the game. That Chalice on 0 messed them up. I had turn 2 Kraum. The other Tymna Kraum player got some stuff going. They had like Tymna plus some attackers, and I went for an overloaded Cyclonic Rift in their combat step. I wanted to Cyclonic Rift to clear the Chalice on 0 so I could untap and Breach win. And I figured doing it in their combat also stops the Tymna connection, stops the extra card draw, stops the damage, restricts them a little bit going into my turn, rather than end-stepping it. And in combat, in response to the Psych Rift, they ad nauseamed. And that was pretty scary. They filled up their hand in the middle of combat. They went to their second main, all gassed up. And between the 3 of us, we were able to tax his resources enough that he had to Tainted Pact for more action. And his Tainted Pact exiled his Demonic Consultation, and I had Dauthi Voidwalker in place, so Tainted Pact was also headed to exile. So with Tainted Pact and Demonic Consultation in exile and Dauthi Voidwalker on the field turning Breach off, there was not a lot of actual ways to win left in the deck, and then we had a big fight over a Chain of Vapor on my Dauthi Voidwalker that tapped him out further, and there was a missequence here. Like what this player had to do was clear my Dauthi Voidwalker, play Underworld Breach, and then build enough Storm to naturally Brain Freeze the rest of the table. That was the out at this point. And he did have the resources to do it, but he made a mistake where instead of targeting my Dauthi Voidwalker with Chain of Vapor, he was supposed to target his Dockside Extortionist and then sack all his lands and bounce all of his mana rocks. And then on the last chain, send it over to Dauthi Voidwalker. And then there's plenty of Storm, plenty of mana, win easily. But missequence that, ended up a little bit short, couldn't get the Brain Freeze going, even though the Voidwalker was clear, and had to pass the turn into my gassed up win. I made a note to myself after this round to talk about some interesting stuff that happened in case I forgot during the rounds. 2 of them happened in this round, or actually 3 of them happened in this round. I already talked about revealing information at the time that it happened, putting piles in the wrong place. This TK player, after they had Nauseamed in combat, and then they tainted pacted after combat. So their hand is a brick of cards, and then the tainted pact exiles a brick of cards. They took their brick of exiled cards from Tainted Pact and put it on top of their brick of cards from Ad Nauseam. And we had a long judge call figuring out where the exile pile stopped and where the hand pile started. It was technically all available information because we saw every card off the Ad Naus and we saw every card off the Tainted Pact, but we didn't remember everything. We were all in the just sort of like, I'm not writing down 35 cards, like, you're going to win or you're not here. It did not leave them face up for us when Naus Resolve just put the pile in the hand. So we had a judge call figuring out where the line between the 2 cards was. Ended up being not a big deal. It was pretty easy to figure it out, but if you're ever not sure, just call a judge. I think this opponent was completely on the up and up. Don't misunderstand me here, but there are a lot of players who do like abuse that, like, oh, oopsie, silly me. And then their hand is 1 card bigger than it should after that accidental Tainted Pact touch. This is what Alex Bertoncini did for years. He wasn't like dealing off the bottom of his deck and stuff. He was just making innocent looking mistakes with a smile. And then if he got caught, he'd smile and say, oh, well, my bad. And just back it up. But so many of those just push through. Just call a judge if anything weird happens. You're not a jerk. There was a SWAT that targeted deflecting SWAT in this game, which is just a fun little interaction. It's not particularly tricky. So deflecting SWAT, you change the target of your target for deflecting SWAT on resolution. So if I deflecting SWAT your Chain of Vapor and you let it resolve, I choose a new target for Chain of Vapor, then you could SWAT Chain of Vapor. Or if you SWAT my SWAT, you could SWAT my SWAT to your SWAT. And then when your SWAT resolves, my SWAT no longer has a valid target. It just fizzles and Chain of Vapor stays where it was the whole time. It's mostly functionally the same, but there could be spots where that matters, whether you let the first one resolve and then just move the original spell back where you want it, or just never letting it get swatted in the first place. Counting to 90, we already talked about a little bit. Well, there's a little more to say here. Counting to 90, this is the Get Wrong Monster player that I already talked about. And what happened was he didn't just declare draw 90 out of the blue. He did a card count. So if you count all your cards in your hand, graveyard, exile, and battlefield, you should be able to subtract that number from 100 and know how many cards are left in your deck. The Get Wrong Monster player counted 12 permanents or 12 cards that were not in the deck and said, okay, I need 90 triggers. And then just worked his way up to 90 triggers. And I knew that was not the correct number of cards in the deck, but I don't know exactly what Get Wrong Monster does. Maybe it does win off of an empty deck trigger at the end of the line. I don't know. Maybe those 2 triggers are important. But I certainly wasn't going to correct it. And while cards in deck and cards in battlefield and everything are public information, cards in hand, all of that stuff is free, available information for all players. You can't lie about it, but if I hear my opponent thinking out loud and say the wrong thing, I am not beholden to correct that. So counting to 90 is one of them. And then Slaughter Pact and Mausoleum Secrets, these were also both from this game. This all happened when the other TK player was trying to go off. Dargo Tavesh had 2 mana available during combat after the Ad Nauseam. And he was able to cast Mausoleum Secrets, which is a 2 mana instant, 1 and a black. You get to tutor a black card with mana value less than or equal to the number of creatures in your graveyard. He had no creatures in graveyard and could tutor Slaughter Pact. And could Slaughter Pact Dockside Extortionist in combat before it was picked up by the Cyclonic Grip, thus making more mana. However, the Chalice on 0 that Magda had played on turn 1 of the game was still there. Tavesh proposed this line, and I knew the chalice was there, and I said, yep, sounds good. And I thought, I could tell Tymna Kraum was kind of on the hook here, like, handful of interaction from the Naus. You're allowed to cast zeros into Chalice. They just won't resolve after the Chalice of the Void trigger resolves. If somebody chooses to fight over a spell that's about to be countered anyway, because they don't realize it's about to be countered anyway, then that's fine. You just flush some cards out of their hand. And I was looking for that. Like, I wasn't going to let Slaughter Pact resolve illegally, but I was going to let Tymna Kraum have priority on the spell before Chalice would have countered it. And Tavesh Dargo finished tutoring, put the Slaughter Pact in his hand, was about to cast it, and then went, oh no, the Chalice, and just blew the whole thing. So now Tymna Kraum knows that they don't have to fight over Slaughter Pact, and it's just one of these little things where when you think somebody is about to mess up in a legal way, if the game rules are about to be broken, or if the game rules have been broken, stop them, fix it. But if they're about to make an error, just shut up. Let it happen. This is not a casual table like the, oh, hold on, don't tutor for that, dear friend. There's a Chalice of the Void. Like, yeah, I know, but you could still draw out a Fierce Guardianship here. And then kind of blew it there. So that's one more piece of interaction we had to fight through, because once you said it out loud, the jig was up. So kind of a little misstep there. And he did realize his error afterwards and feel pretty bad about it. This same player also, this one's funnier, that Mausoleum Secrets they used to tutor Slaughter Pact was in the Void from my Dothi Voidwalker, and I had no creatures in my graveyard. When we finally got to my turn, I was looking at all my cards. I was like, okay, how do I win this game from here? And the Magda player kept reading Mausoleum Secrets, a card that I knew was in the Void, but I was not thinking about at all. Magda kept reading it. And then Tavesh Dargo said, yeah, if he uses Voidwalker, he could get a 1-drop, like Vamp Tutor or something. And I had not been considering at all that the Voidwalker, activating it in order to cast the Mausoleum Secrets, would put a creature in my graveyard so I could tutor a black 1-drop. And I was like, oh, cool, good idea. And I tutored Demonic Consultation and won cleanly. It was not on my radar. I don't know that I would have found it. I like to think that if I had to sit there long enough with it, I would have started reading all the cards and figured it out. But yeah, Magda drew my attention to it. Tavesh Dargo said the line out loud. And I was just like, okay, cool. Yeah, I'll do that. And then I won the game. So pretty wild pod here, actually. A lot of really interesting things happened in a game that was mostly pretty straightforward, but we had the judge call, we had the Slaughter Pact into Chalice abusing the priority order kind of thing, like get someone on the line, hope they forget about onboard information. Then we had the players giving up information and just telling me how to win. So really exciting pod there. For the absolute best Magic the Gathering apparel on the market, check out the link in the video description to coalesceapparel.shop, and be sure to use the code BoshNRoll for 10% off when you check out. Round 7 ended up being on camera. I was in third going into this round. The Rog Thrasios player in first seat was in second going into this round. And I knew that the person in first had drawn. If I win this pod, I'm first for the top 16, and I'm in first seat in the top 16 and in the top 4, guaranteed. If I make the top 4, obviously, but I'm in first seat for all remaining matches in the tournament that I'm part of, and that matters a lot. I was inclined to play it out just for that. Like, I'm in anyway, might as well battle. Rog Thras was comfortable with a draw because he was ahead of me on breakers anyway, would have been drawing into second place, pretty good spot. Najila was in with a draw, out with a loss, and Bruce Thrasios was on the bubble. They were in the breaker scrum with a draw, and they were in with a win. So they really, if they valued taking their fate truly in their own hands, they need to win this pod. If they agree to a draw, they're just rolling dice, which I think why why register for a tournament if you're willing to do that? So luckily, I didn't have to sorry 3 players who wanted to draw by playing it out, because Bruce Thrass had to play it anyway. This game was on stream. We ended up going to a draw anyway, 90 minutes later. My brain was fried. I was feeling awful. I wish I had just taken the draw to start, but again, Bruce Thrass couldn't actually take the draw, so it probably wasn't on the table anyway. And I actually punted a sub-game on a win attempt. You could see it on camera. I had an Orcish Bowmaster in play for most of this game, and we were all working together to use it to control the various Thrasioses, the Najeela and its various pieces. We were all taking turns drawing cards to punish other people while my army grew and grew. And there was a turn where I tried to shove a win, and I knew Thrasios had Deflecting Swan in hand, and they had just played Rhystic Study, and they tapped out to do it. And during my win attempt, I was feeding Rhystic Study on purpose to get Orcish Bowmaster triggers, which killed Najeela and killed some stuff on the other Thrasios player's board. But what I really needed to do was just hit Thrasios 3 times this Thrasios, the player who I knew had SWAT. Because with them tapped out, the only interaction they can have is free interaction. And if I kill their commander, that cuts off 2 of their 4 possible free interaction spells. I guess Mindbreak Trap, like Force, Mindbreak Trap, Fierce Guardianship, Deflecting SWAT are the free spells they could have. And I knew they had 1. And just killing Thrasios turns off 2 of the possible ones. And I was just distracted elsewhere with the Bowmaster and just picking off other stuff and misevaluated the board on that sub-game, the Bowmaster sub-game, and then I ended up losing a counter war on my Breach to Thrasios, who played both Fierce Guardianship and Deflecting SWAT. And then we just farted around for another 60 minutes. It felt awful. I knew I had punted like 30 minutes into the game and just had to sit there treading water, begging for air for the rest of the time, and then felt physically and mentally awful by the end of it, which was perfect because since our round went to time, we were the last result. We were also on camera, which takes time to get set up. We were the last result. The top 16 turned around immediately, basically had time to eat, and then I was back at it, like no food, no rest, no anything. And that's the top 16 pod. I was second seat. Kinnan was first seat. I mulled a 5 and kept a 1-lander with Bowmasters, Lotho, Flooded Strand. The Flooded Strand was the 1 land. I had Bowmasters, Lotho, and maybe Tainted Pact. It was a bunch of really good 2-drops. And specifically, I was thinking Bowmasters can clip a Mana Dork out of Kinnan, and then Lotho can grind me out of this. And I just didn't find a land. Missed on my first draw, missed on my second draw. My third draw was Mystic Remora, just the most insulting middle finger. At least I could cast it, though. Mystic Remora drew me 3 or 4 cards in the turn cycle, which did find my second land, but by then Kinnan had already gone completely nuts. By the way, this hand that I mulled a 5 and kept a speculative hand in this pod, Kinnan had Kinnan active on turn 3 with protection. The Sisay player in seat 3 after me in turn order had turn 1 Sisay with extra mana available, and the Tymna Kraum player in 4th seat had turn 1 Rhystic Study. That's the level of power, the level of hand that I kept this sketchy 5 into. So I don't know if I would have gone to 4 if I was feeling better and not just completely gassed out from the last round. Generally, kind of a run bad, and it happens. It's Magic. I'm not complaining. Just one of the strengths of Blue Farm is the range of keepable hands that it has. It has a lot of mana sources, a lot of reasonable things to do. You don't really need anything specific to happen. You just need to hit your first 3 land drops and start drawing cards with Tymna. And going to 5 and never finding a hand that actually did that was kind of shitty. But that was the end of the tournament, and the Kinnan player who won our pod ended up winning the whole thing. And that was my experience at the Cookout. My top 16 list is posted on Moxfield now. Shout out to Moxfield, also a sponsor of this channel. Once again, shout out to Eminence. Shout out to everyone who played in the tournament, all my opponents, everyone who hung out, all the judge staff. Everyone was great. And I'm turning this one around really quickly. I'm playing in Surfside, which is another Eminence event in San Diego, California, this weekend, the weekend of August 5th. I've never back-to-back cEDH tournaments before. I'm currently deciding if I'm going to make the changes I talked about before, cut Fairy Mastermind and Blue Blast for 2 other things, and then kind of massage my flex outs a little bit. Or I might just play Tivit, a deck that I also am very much in love with. But maybe there will be another one of these next week. Hopefully a winner's report. For now, I'm going to sign off. Thank you all for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Check out the Patreon if you want my lists for cEDH, Legacy, everything. Any tournament I'm going to play in, the list is posted before the tournament. You could be doing what I'm doing. And I'm doing pretty well. Just saying. Check that out, and I'll see you next time. Adios.